Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigilant Network show. My name is Emma Vigilant, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications so you know when we're going live and when we aren't going live. You can comment below. You can like the stream if we're live, and that will increase engagement. You can rate us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify and elsewhere. Hello, Bradley Alsop.
Hey, Emma.
Hello. Gang green over here, wearing green for the Jets.
No, I'm wearing green because I'm green with a furious envy about our picks disparity this last week.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I think you rat fucked me, but I'm gonna. I'm not gonna get into it. But
okay. Well, I'm sorry. I thought that when the commander said that Jaden Daniels was week to week.
Oh my god.
And I said to you, it seems like he's probably not going to play this next week because week to week indicates you're going to miss at least 1 week.
So when did Dan Quinn call you?
So, I don't know if Dan Quinn, based on our commentary on this program, would
he was like, actually, by the way, Jaden's going to start, so...
have our backs in this regard or give me any kind of heads up. No, you just lost fair and square.
Yeah.
But you're really only, because you were a win ahead, and I only went 2-1 last week, we'll get into that, you were just 1 game behind me, so no need to whine about it.
No, you're right. I'm pissed. I'm irate.
You're irate.
I'm barely going to be able to do the podcast.
All right. Well, I'll just run through this because I'm
going to give very, very minimal commentary.
Did you see that week 8 there's no buys at all? It's odd because we now have a 17-game season that they're just
every team plays.
They're donut holing the bye week situation. So every team played
no
week
rest.
8. No rest. And honestly, if they're going to keep expanding the season, which they're going to go to 18 games, just telling you right now, they need to do 2 buys or something like that, or mini buys twice or something to that effect, because the number of injuries this year has been really rough. We'll get into that a little bit in the show. But first, we'll say the World Series, just an update on that front. The Yankees are down 2-0. The Dodgers are up 2-0. I would say that, it's not a series until the home team loses, but it's a little bit concerning because, Aaron Judge, for example, just has not had a very good postseason. He's gotten a little bit better since he found his footing a bit in the Guardian series, but the thing is just that the Dodgers have so much star power. There's a glimmer of hope for the Yankees in the sense that, Shohei Ohtani banged up his shoulder on a slide in Game 2. He's expected to play in Game 3, but we will see if he's limited in any way. But yeah, the Yankees had the Yankees-Dodgers Game 1 was thrilling. And Cole actually had a really, really strong pitching night. But when they went to extra innings, they intentionally walked Mookie Betts, bases loaded, and it was the grand slam by Charlie. What's his last name?
Freddie Freeman.
Or Freddie Freeman, not by Freddie Freeman. Yes, I did a whole Wikipedia search into him because I was not fully aware about Freddie Freeman, but I remember him vaguely from the Braves.
No, he's it's an interesting. He's had a bit of an interesting ride through the MLB. He was probably one of the best all-around players for 7 to 8 years in Atlanta before going to the Braves and going to the Dodgers. But he has had a bit of a long-term either back or something like that injury that basically he is playing through a pretty consistent amount of pain throughout as he gets older. So he's honestly probably a Hall of Famer in terms of how well he's played in his MLB career, but he, relative to so many of the bats in the Dodgers lineup, I think has not been seen as formidable. So
right.
Intentionally walking Betts to get him up with the bases loaded. It was a bit of a gamble by Aaron Boone to begin with to put Nestor Cortez out there to be the one
the controversy.
Right, to be the one to, throw to Freeman. And it was just a bit of a hanging low, low in the zone fastball that Freeman just torched out of the park.
First pitch, beautiful
And
thing
the first
of beauty.
And the first, if I'm not mistaken, I think what they were saying on the broadcast is the first walk-off grand slam in the World Series ever.
Yeah.
So a really incredible moment, a really memorable moment,
call
no matter
by Joe
what happens.
Davis.
Yeah, it was just like that. That is what makes, to me, I think I've said this on the program before, but as football and basketball have probably superseded baseball in terms of my interests, I think because of how much I watched the Mets when I was a kid, like, 11 or 12, like sitting in my basement watching Tom Glavine pitch. Baseball has always possessed the most magic to me of a sport, of just like there being kind of something that exists beyond like the just mortal like
Well,
coil.
there's a romanticism to borrow from Brad Pitt's character
in Moneyball.
In Moneyball,
yeah. I just
Really
so just seeing that type of thing, like the crack of the bat, the way the crowd, and as you said, Joe Davis react, like there's really nothing like it. So I'm just super thrilled that game one lived up to the billing of like this powerful, this power-packed matchup between two of the biggest clubs in the league.
And for the Yankees to be to have scored a run at the top of the 10th in the extra innings, right? And in the extra inning in that regard. So they're up 3-2. If they just were able to prevent one scoring play, they would have been able to take that first game. And Cole's pitching was phenomenal to get them to that point. And prior to that, at the bottom of the 10th, Alex Verdugo had a phenomenal out for Shohei Ohtani.
Like going into foul territory, spilling over into the stands.
He sacrificed his body to spill into the stands to catch the foul ball to get that out. Then they intentionally walked Betts, bases loaded, and it's that grand slam. And it's like, okay, this is like, how could you imagine being there? And they kept panning to all the celebrities, like
I know exactly.
Arrested Development guy. It's
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman in the crowd, and it's like, oh my! I can't even imagine being in the stands.
Funnily enough, I almost feel like recently in this postseason, the Dodgers games have been more star-studded than even any of like the Staples Center's games for like the Lakers and stuff. Like,
well, the Lakers are kind of depressing, but
yeah, I guess and also maybe it's just nice, nice to have good baseball in a town like Los Angeles, but it's funny, as you said, though, the Jazz Chisholm like steal and score, then the Verdugo catch would probably have been like the narrative of that game without Freeman getting up to bat. So it's just funny to also think about some of these moments that will be somewhat much more unheralded because they just didn't swing the outcome because of Freeman's heroics. But that is just the cruelty of baseball, that there really isn't a time limit until things just end.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. So we'll see how the rest of the series plays out, but it's really lived up to the billing so far. You want to get into the NFL?
I do.
All right. Let's start here. The Commanders beat the Bears in the game of the year so far, and not in terms of like watching that game. There have been more fun games to watch, notably even the game to open the year, the Chiefs and the Ravens, was a lot more fun.
Yeah.
But this was the signature moment of the season so far. The two top picks in the draft facing off in a rivalry that will be in the NFC, I think, going forward because of the connection between these two guys who have both just looked the part to start their careers in the NFL. It was a really boring game, a defensive battle until the very end. Like, the Commanders only had field goals up to that point. They were 4 field goals, up 12-0. Then the Bears got DeAndre Swift to rip off a nearly 60-yard touchdown run, and they were able to get on the board in that way. So it was 12-7. Then towards the end of the game, the Bears had this awful play call. Like, I don't even know why. I've been seeing people say Refrigerator Perry on Twitter. Apparently this might have been some homage to him. It was insane. They gave the ball to an offensive lineman who immediately fumbled to run into the end zone. So just give it to Roschon Johnson. And they did that later. But some really awful coaching decisions that may come back to haunt Matt Eberflus, because I imagine that Chicago is going to want to throw the bag at Ben Johnson, although he might. I could see him going to Philly, but that's a whole nother situation.
I think people were almost making the joke, and also as I was listening to the as I usually do for my sterling and extremely thorough preparation for the show. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and I think one of the Robert Mays was literally saying like people were making the Fridge Perry joke, but like when they did that, they were it was like the Bears were up like 30 points in the Super Bowl. Like this was like a winnable game for the Bears to throw at
That's the play that you do when you're fucking around.
to throw at this like idiotic goal line pseudo trick play, when also, by the way, not for nothing, Tevin Jenkins went out in this game, was out in this game. Braxton Jones, their left tackle, went out in this game. In what universe are you using more of your offensive line resources to punch in a touchdown when you have 2 running backs? It was so asinine, it's like almost unspeakable.
Or do the fake and throw it to the lineman in the end zone. Don't give it to him to run through the line. I'm sorry. Like, it is an art form to be able to hold the ball high and tight. That's what running backs or fullbacks are able to do. So Roschon Johnson showed that he's completely effective and able to punch it in like he did later in the game when they were at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, making it almost like rendering it moot as if for the idea that they would ever have to do that for whatever reason.
At the end of the day, they turned the ball over. The Commanders had to punt, and that's when the Bears went down and scored that touchdown with Roschon. But I just found it to be a bizarre choice, and who knows how the game could have gone. If maybe they were able to get 2 touchdowns in addition, like if they were able to force a punt again by the Commanders, then okay, then you're able to go up 21-12 as opposed to going up 15-12. We saw what happens, and this is like Matt Eberflus, defensive head coach. How do you let this happen? In part, we know how this was able to happen. It's because the what's the name of this guy? One of the secondary players.
Oh, Tyreek Stevenson. Yeah.
Was taunting the crowd with the ball was being snapped by Jaden Daniels to set up the Hail Mary.
It was somewhat galling piece of video to watch.
How do you let the guy get behind Noah Gray, behind the whole scrum, because it's so obvious that they're going to tip it back so he catches it? They were ahead of the goal line. You can't leave an unmanned tight end behind the scrum where everyone's trying to bat down the ball, because it's a 50-50 situation, and all you need is a Commanders player to go like this and flip it back, like,
give them a shot to catch it.
Touch pass for a layup.
Right.
Yeah. It was incredible that they allowed that to happen. You saw Caleb Williams was furious on the sidelines, rightly so.
Yes.
And I mean, it's just amazing that the magic of this Commanders team, despite there not necessarily being, that secondary has a ton of holes and issues. But Dan Quinn, I got to give him credit. He's been able to coach up that defense, and they played really well against a Bears team that seemingly just went back to their old habits with this offensive line being banged up, but also
just a lack of discipline.
Inefficient offense. I mean, they looked horrible. They were scoreless for a majority of this game.
Yeah, and Caleb Williams, I think, really kind of lit up in the fourth quarter, and we saw some really great throws from him. But I think there's still something to be said about the consistency of this offense, kind of down in and down out, to sort of like just even if leave explosive plays out of it, just kind of move the ball consistently, even at like a 5 to 7 yard clip, basically per down. And the reason I sort of say that is because every week why I've been so impressed for the most part with Jaden Daniels is that I was mostly concerned that he was only going to be able to kind of rely on these explosive plays both through the air and on his feet, but he has done so much more to really be patient, keep his eyes up, and not just kind of pull the ripcord and break contain as a crutch. He uses it actually effectively. Like he will stay
smart about it.
Totally.
He sees the field like he's been in the league for 3 years already.
His pocket presence and his ability to evade pressure in the pocket is already quite seasoned in a way that I was concerned wouldn't translate.
Yeah.
And he's proved me very, very wrong in that regard. And I think as a result, more positive gains are open to him, whereas I still think for a bit we're seeing the flashes with Caleb Williams, and I'm really not worried about him. I just think it's understandable. You're halfway through your first season as a professional quarterback. I still think the game is a little fast still.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Like I would still take Caleb Williams over Jaden Daniels. They're both phenomenal and have the ability to be top 10 quarterbacks in the league for quite a long time. But there's the different arm angles and the.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's a player who throws the ball with more strength than Caleb Williams outside of Josh Allen. Like, I'm being serious, but he really has incredible arm talent. And I don't want the Bears' shitty ass offense and this questionable decision maker at head coach to take away from the talent that Caleb Williams possesses. I really do think that he's going to be a really incredible player for quite a while. And again, the Bears still are above 500. They could still make the playoffs, especially when we see, like, will the Packers be able to survive with a more extended injury to Jordan Love? We don't know how that's going to shake out. They're still going to be evaluating that at this point. I mean, the NFC North is the best division in football by far right now, which is amazing to say. I mean, the AFC North is really good too, but I think with the downfall a little bit of the Bengals, I'm not going to put them in the category of the division that now has all teams with winning records at this point.
And it's unfortunate for there to be such a glaring and public mistake that Tyreek Stevenson made in that moment, because I mean, there's just really no way to slice. There's just really any way you slice it. It's pretty bad. It's pretty disastrous. Like,
he apparently apologized.
No, he seems genuinely remorseful, and also it's unfortunate too, because like if it was sort of, it'd be one thing if I kind of was like, okay, sort of seems emblematic of the guy / the player. He's actually been a really, really impressive and high upside young corner. So like, I hope this doesn't like completely taint his reputation / ruin his kind of morale as a result of making such a costly error. But because I really genuinely think he's a very good player, and between him, Kyler Gordon, and Jalen Johnson, I actually think there are a few really strong players in this Bears secondary. And this Bears defense is, I think for the most part, is still very effective. I just think we're struggling to kind of weave all of that together so that there's actually sort of some cohesiveness in this entire team.
I'm not worried about. I mean, basically they gave up a big pass to Terry McLaurin, and that's it. Like, I mean, let's not look at rose-colored glasses about the entirety of Jaden Daniels' performance in this game. Both quarterbacks struggled. This was a defensive slog with a big error at the end of the game that you can pin back to coaching, in my view, and that particular player, because there was trash talk the entire game. Jawing, pissed off. It's cool how they took to this. I mean, as a whole team galvanizing behind their quarterback, but I'm not making any bold proclamations about either quarterback based on this result. I think that's so reactive. Both are really talented. Both are really good. And just as an aside, hate the Barstool universe in almost every way, except I do have a soft spot for both PFT Commenter and Big Cat and their show. Part of my take, because I think PFT actually has good politics. They seem like decent guys. But what they had a bet going, because they're big. Big Cat's a huge Bears fan, and PFT is a huge Commanders fan. So if anyone wants a little bit of a pick me up, check out that footage from last night, because I think a tattoo bet was also on the line. So some fun stuff over there on PFT. But really, just an incredible signature moment for the season, and the Commanders take a commanding lead in their division, no pun intended. I mean, the Eagles will have something to say about that. We'll get to them in a little bit. But next week, the Cardinals actually face the Bears. And this is a way to transition to that game for me, because, like, that's going to be a really interesting matchup. The Cardinals now lead their division.
Yep, 4-4. They're up there.
The 49ers are now 4-4 after last night. We'll get into that in a bit. But the Cardinals have the tiebreak, because the 49ers are they 0-3 in the division? Or did they beat the Seahawks? I think, I forget. They at the very least have lost to the Cardinals, and they've lost to they beat
the Seahawks last 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. So they avoided going 0-3, but the Cardinals had the tiebreak 4-4 ahead of the 49ers. I just got to say, I was really impressed with the Cardinals, and I'm starting to feel like our faith in them as maybe a sneaky dark horse team to sneak into the playoffs might have some merit because look, the Cardinals defense, they're not talented, but they seem to be coached really well. It's like Buda Baker and another bunch of also rans. But like the Dolphins were in command of this game they led 10-0, 20-10, and 27-18. And in the fourth quarter, Kyler Murray played tough, smart football, some scrambles that were timely, but really they were big catches to Marvin Harrison, who got going in this game, and Trey McBride, who's this great safety blanket for him. And the Cardinals, they kept just hanging around, and they ended up pulling it out at the end of the game with a field goal that ended the game.
This is a team too that like when all of the pieces are kind of coalescing and at their best, which is I think sort of what we saw in this game, which I don't think we'd seen entirely the first few weeks. As in, I feel like there were a few games where McBride was activated with Murray, whereas Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't, vice versa. Either or the run game really got going, but then the passing game was struggling, or vice versa. While the run game wasn't particularly successful yesterday, everything in the pass game was working for the most part. Kyler was doing exactly what you want to see Kyler doing, showing off his next level unreal athleticism for his size, avoiding pressure, drifting to one side of the field or the other, uncorking insane like laser balls like from whatever angle or aspect of the field.
The baseball aspect of his throwing is really just makes him such a unique player.
Yeah, sometimes you almost think sometimes it's almost like he's throwing a ball and it looks as if he's like throwing somebody out at home from center field.
Right.
Like, it's like
he's playing shortstop and throwing to first. And that's how he's able to throw across his body like that. Mahomes has that same skill set with his father being a former MLB player.
And so it was just nice to see the Kyler Marvin Harrison Jr. connection really kind of going. Trey McBride, despite not getting into the end zone, just being a chain mover the entire game, getting over 100 yards. And then underratedly, I think I maybe have mentioned him on the program before, but just as kind of like a so-called glue guy or number 3, number 4 option, I've really enjoyed watching Michael Wilson.
From Stanford.
Yeah, like because I think honestly
Dortch is kind of good as another second to third-ish option.
I just think with Drew Petzing at the helm of this offense, when things are really clicking, it's a very, very interesting, layered, intelligent, intentional offense in
Balanced.
the league. And there's just a lot. There are many levers that they can pull, and I like that they do that. Despite obviously, as I've been saying, not having an incredible offensive line, the run game struggling in parts. Like for them,
but they can pass protect better than they can. I feel,
and I think they sort of schemed that up too, which is helpful. And also, by some advanced metrics, this Dolphins defense has not been a bunch of slouches. So this was also like. This wasn't the easiest matchup for them to win, especially win basically at the buzzer. I mean, as time was expiring with the field goal to make it a 1-point victory.
Right.
But in this moment where this particular division is not like lights out the most competitive, where usually I feel like we're seeing, it's mostly kind of for the last few years, it would either in one way or the other, it was like, Shanahan versus McVay, Shanahan versus Pete Carroll, like in terms of like kind of who's sort of like in the pecking order in the division. So for the Cardinals to be even like obviously 500, but still at the top, that's, all you have to do is to get an automatic berth is just be at the top of one of these guys. And so if they're in contention for this now halfway through the season, I think that's a very good spot for them to be in, especially with how some of the earlier performances looked for them.
Yeah, and the Bears going to Arizona off a loss, that becomes a really, really important game. Will the Bears fall to 500 and kind of get lost in a really competitive NFC North, and will the Cardinals fall behind in their very tentative hold over the NFC West? So I'm excited for that game. That's going to be something that's really interesting. And the Dolphins, It looks like they had big systemic problems that didn't include Tua, okay? And looks like Tua isn't a top 10 quarterback that's going to elevate this squad beyond what we see. I mean, really, the best, when the run game wasn't working for them, they weren't able to really be efficient on offense. So I still feel the same way as I felt before about the Dolphins, a really flawed team that lost a ton of players in the offseason. And it's showing that there are limits to this offense when you have a smart defensive coordinator that can figure things out. It's not that's the thing about Tua. He can run that offense with great efficiency, but can he elevate a team? I don't think he can. And that was at home. So that was another game that they basically kind of gave away at the end.
I think we're just getting to a certain point with the Dolphins, just with what this long-term outlook is, that like we're really kind of in the fog now with them, in the sense that there's a number, you're gonna, there's some of these bills with these players are going to come due, and also, I mean, like literally, like financially, Jalen Waddle, Jalen, whatever, what might become of Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Phillips, like, what to do with Teron Armstead, knowing that obviously he's still one of their best offensive linemen, but just is getting into his age 33, 34 season has had a strong difficulty staying on the field. And then being on the hook for Tua's, financial hit going forward, knowing that it's pretty precarious, his health situation, and it doesn't seem like, as we discussed at length last week, that he's overly concerned about it in a way that I think that lack of concern is almost more concerning than anything else.
Personal choice, no guardian cap.
Right,
sick,
right.
bro.
And in a way, obviously, that is not controllable, right? It's not as if anyone could mandate it, right? Which was what we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
but
he could for his family,
right,
wife and children, but he'd rather look tough.
But so all that being said, I'm just curious if things continue to go a certain direction, and by that I mean if there's a chance, which I think especially even with the division mostly just being the Bills and everybody else, if they can't make it to the playoffs, I think there are going to be a number of real significant changes at hand.
Yeah, I think so too. Although Mike McDaniel did get a contract extension, I guess
it's a matter of what's
problem.
Right. I guess it's a matter of what Stephen Ross also wants to do in terms of like if he feels the need to have a fall guy.
Yes.
For whatever happens.
And they just gave Tua a boatload of money, so it can't be him.
Exactly. Right.
Right. So another, I think. Well, this was just an upset. The Browns beating the Ravens.
Oh, what do you know? What do you know? Deshaun Watson is not the quarterback for literally one game, and they beat one of the best teams in the AFC.
Yeah, this was
in their division.
What I predicted. I said it would be a really close game, and the 8.5 point spread was way too much for the Ravens and the Browns.
Looking back
in Cleveland, I was like, they're underestimating how bad the Vegas and the betting public is underestimating how bad Deshaun Watson was. And you just saw, whoa, a professional NFL quarterback was able to run that offense and put up numbers on a Ravens defense that is well coached, but definitely a step down than in previous Lamar Jackson years. It's that offense that's running the show. And if the Ravens don't score 30 points, there's a good chance they lose the game.
And I mean, and just I think what we've been saying too, which was very apparent. And of course, I think whoever was making these decisions, I think also knew this, but we're just more. I think when you're a payday lender your whole life and you make a predatory loan, you most likely don't try to go back and say I made a mistake. So I think Jimmy Haslam is pretty used to bilking others at the expense of for while continuing to profit, even if it's a bad financial arrangement for everybody else. That being said,
well said.
Deshaun, like we've seen in a number of different machinations, this offense look pretty effective with Jacoby Brissett at the helm. Pretty effective to the point where, Stefanski...
They made the playoffs with Joe Flacco.
That's Stefanski, Stefanski winning his second coach of the year mostly by virtue of what happened with the Joe Flacco-led offense. And Flacco basically coming off the couch at 37, 38 years old and winning comeback player of the year with his performance in Cleveland. It was mostly apparent to me that the offensive output was never an issue related to Kevin Stefanski. Like, it is always, in my view, like, he is a play caller and a coach who can basically enact a capable, exciting offense when anybody except Deshaun Watson is behind center. And that was clear again today with Jameis Winston, who, take away Jameis's personal flaws and professional flaws, because
and overall weirdness.
Just a weird guy behavior. He's the Dwight Howard of the NFL.
That's funny. Yeah.
Is just kind of like a goober weirdo who also I think is probably is a little bit of a man child, which leads to some of his personal and professional proclivities.
The crab legs and all that.
Yeah, and Jameis is in for his ambition, good and bad, in the sense that the only way that Jameis Winston knows how to play the quarterback position is to push the ball as aggressively as possible down the field, which was night and day from what Deshaun Watson was doing. And of course, that might open up the possibility for some interceptions or some turnovers, but it also opened up this offense for a few really nice, significantly explosive plays.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, David Njoku and Cedric Tillman, two guys who I think utilized properly are explosive and good young talent still, even though Njoku's obviously a little bit further into his career than Tillman is. They were afterthoughts in this Browns offense with Deshaun Watson. They were anonymous. These people, these guys who are actually useful NFL players had nothing to do because Deshaun Watson couldn't stay upright for more than 4 or 5 seconds.
Njoku at the very least, that was a security blanket for him, but they obviously 2 touchdowns. It was his best game of the year. Tillman getting in the end zone too. Jameis Winston almost turned the ball over 2 or 3 times.
Oh, no question. Yeah, he will do that.
That will happen. But to your point, Joe Flacco was also turning the ball over a lot during that year he was starting for them, and they were still able to make it work because honestly, the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now are throwing a lot of interceptions. It's about a risk-reward situation. It's better to throw interceptions than dink and dunk all the time and take some risks. That's what NFL defenses are showing people.
And that's similar with what Flacco was doing a la Jameis in a way, which was
he
is gunslinging. He is they were going to throw it up to Amari Cooper and see what happens, whereas opposed to Deshaun Watson is mostly wilt and
there's no
die.
Amari Cooper anymore, but yeah, I mean he's
right. Last season.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's also what's impressive is that there was no Amari Cooper and they were still able to move the ball down the field.
Right.
The Ravens pass rush was not able to get home.
Right.
They had 2 sacks on Jameis Winston, but that was really just at the end of the first half when they were trying to drive the ball down the field. And also Justin Tucker is not the same. That could have been a tie game, I think, right? Or what was the final score for Browns Ravens? But Justin Tucker, it wouldn't have been a tie game, but it would have been closer. Justin Tucker
29-24, yeah.
Missed a fourth quarter field goal at around 50 yards, which there are a lot of kickers where a majority of the time they're going to hit that. And Tucker has had some misses this year that can be explained by age. But yeah, I just think that the Ravens defense is a concern. They've had struggles throughout the year. There's 2 big names on defense that, I think make people a little bit more tricked into thinking that they're more talented. Like Kyle Hamilton's a really talented player.
Roquan Smith.
Roquan Smith is amazing, but they did lose Patrick Queen to the Steelers. And their pass rush has been, as I mentioned, a little bit inconsistent. And they were not able to get home last week or last game against the Browns. And Jameis Winston tore them up for it.
And the thing is, too, with Roquan Smith is as much as, there is a number of years, both with the Bears and with the Ravens, where he's basically been the best linebacker in the league.
Yes.
But he is getting a little bit older. So I think sort of like the side-to-side, basically green dot, I'm going to kind of swallow up every play capacity, it's not as much there, which is sort of why Queen, who I think had his best season in Baltimore because of his partnership with Smith, but Queen not being there to kind of deploy the aggressiveness and the tackling, the zeal for tackling that Patrick Queen would exhibit in Baltimore. They lost that edge a little bit, I think, without Queen being the complement to Roquan Smith now that he's in Pittsburgh as opposed to being in Baltimore.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And they've been struggling against the run a little bit too. So that's that. Ravens, I still think, are one of the best teams in the league and in the AFC, but they have some defensive issues that they need to work on. All right, we'll turn now to the Jets. Let's just get this over with here in terms of upsets.
No comment.
I mean, look, they're both 2-6, so I don't know how much of an upset it could be. But the thing
No,
is,
right?
is
No,
that,
it's literally two shit teams beating each other up. Like it's actually not an upset. You're right. It's not.
but the talent differential. I'm sorry.
That's what's so embarrassing about it.
Receivers, you take all the receivers on the Jets ahead of basically all of them.
You wouldn't take Keyshawn Butte over and Demario Douglas over Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall
and Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard and Mike Williams and Braylon Allen and Tyler Conklin. I mean, look, I'd take Hunter Henry over Tyler Conklin.
Okay,
that's
totally
it.
fine.
On
That's-
defense, Sauce Gardner, you take over.
No, it's so embarrassing.
I mean,
it's there is no bottom. We are at the point where the abyss is too friendly for these New York Jets.
They have not won a game since they fired Robert Saleh. They are 2-6. Saleh, for all of our issues with him, was loved in the locker room. You saw like those guys were basically on the verge of tears talking about Garrett Wilson said we talk every day. He still means so much to me.
Yeah, someone I think at some point, I can't remember which player, but one of them was like, we're still gonna like play for him. You know what I mean? Like there
he's
was
still
some
helping us. We're texting him and he's still helping us. Someone said this to me on Twitter and it was such a good point. Robert Saleh is like oh God, who did they compare him to? Who's like actually Robert Saleh and Nick Sirianni are two sides of the same coin. They were both coaches that were not equipped to handle or coach their incredibly talented rosters and and have been wasting them. Sirianni, I still think too, although they did win this weekend. But the difference is that Sirianni is a douchebag and Saleh is actually like genuinely a really good guy.
Yeah, I do think Saleh, despite I think my view on it is that Saleh, despite many of my criticisms of him as a coach, which I still think are valid in the sense of that I think he was in over his head a little bit. I think he was a little too willing to cede leadership / like strategy responsibilities to Aaron Rodgers in like a pretty overwhelming capacity.
But you have to wonder how much of that is what he was forced to do to keep his job.
And how much of that is really in his control necessarily. And then the other thing I always said is that I just think for a guy who really, I think in what we saw on Hard Knocks and what we saw on how he kind of addresses things, his ethos of sort of like toughness and tenacity did not cohere with like an actual semblance of like discipline for his players.
Yes.
And certainly I also don't think Aaron Rodgers in basically any aspect contributed positively to that being something to improve in any capacity.
But they've looked more undisciplined after he's left,
which is like hard to imagine. Because you're right, it's totally they somehow some way they are playing more stupidly than they did before Saleh got fired.
And they still don't put Sauce Gardner on an island. Like they're still playing zone. It's still this. It's an
nothing has
outdated
changed
scheme
on both sides of the ball.
The offense is worse.
Yeah, the offense. Right. We've been joking. Like the offense is, mid-90s 49ers ball, basically, with no changes, no adjustments, no motion, nothing, no sort of like different protection packages to kind of soften the blow of how bad this offensive line still is, despite all of the investment in it. And the defense, which was supposed to be basically the calling card, even if this offense was the worst in the league, which it still kind of looks like, they got torn up basically by Drake May and then Jacoby Brissett coming in relief work to lose at the buzzer from a dump pass to Ramondre Stevenson.
That's the other thing is the Jets were up.
Right. They were leading at some point.
They were also leading in the game previously.
Against the Steelers.
Yeah. And they've had second half struggles because, a defense adjusts and Aaron Rodgers goes, I'm not going to adjust.
No, that's
I'm running this the way I want to.
Yeah, no, that's different, actually.
What my mind meld tells me. He's got like a grudge against Breece Hall. I don't even understand why he doesn't dump it off more. He's right there. Just create easy completions. He's decided who he's going to throw it to before the ball is snapped.
And I think that's pretty fundamental to it is that
as a veteran,
any of these so-called easy options that might present themselves, the easy options to him are the ones that he's basically already sort of like telegraphing for himself. It's not as if he's not going to see something and be like, oh, I need to adjust, go through my reads once more or something like that. It's sort of like, okay, I want to do my third read. Literally no matter what happens, I'm going to do my third read.
I mean, it's just crazy. The Jets scored 20 plus points. I saw Twitter's football perspective.
Oh yes, this is a horrible
Committed
stat.
0 turnovers, held their opponent to under 250 yards of offense. From 1940 until yesterday, teams were 256-0 when they hit those metrics. But the Jets just lost in New England, 25-22.
So 256.
With Drake May coming out. That's the thing is like Drake May's athleticism, it gives the Pats like more playmaking ability. They are better on offense, even if he's not as accurate right now as Jacoby Brissett. He has shown flashes, and his arm and his deep ball are real legitimate threats.
Yeah, no, I honestly is like the rushing ability and some of the, and as you said, some of the arm talent. I really last 2 weeks I've been pretty impressed. And
Totally.
I do hope he's not out for too long. Just because honestly, I think he's sort of for such a young raw player. I feel like he's doing well with adjusting to some game speed, which is was again my concern. I was worried his head might be spinning, but he's doing pretty well. I think to acquit himself in the sense of going through his reads. Making sure he's on, you know, even if he's not necessarily, I'm gonna deduce every single pre-snap adjustment or anything like that. I just think he's still making smart choices, and he is really fun to watch when he kind of breaks the ripcord and starts rushing. If he has to kind of evade pressure and stuff like that, he is like. It's fun to see some of the athleticism I think he derives from being a multi-sport athlete prior to football.
Yeah.
Like he was, he comes from a long lineage. His brothers were all UNC basketball players. Like he played baseball, basketball, I think ran track or something in school before he really started focusing on quarterback. And I think he's not even 22 yet, or is maybe just 22.
So young,
so
yeah.
like to see these flashes now of someone who is honestly, in the age of how professionalized quarterback prospects are, basically from middle school at this point
Really
now.
green, yeah.
To see that is good to think imagine what he can do if he's already absorbing this much now, what that might look like in 2 years. But so all that being said, for something I'm if Drake May, I'm okay, cool. Drake May kind of went off, but to then lose to fucking Jacoby Brissett after all that. After leading the game, and as you said, leading the game against Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson throws 3 touchdowns when losing the game, so that Devontae Adams gets traded to lose to the Steelers twice, and then lose this game, interdivisional game against the backup QB who was benched for the rookie. We're in hell right now. The Jets are in hell.
Yeah, the Jets are in hell, and it's a hell of their own making because they decided to give Aaron Rodgers the keys to the entire team.
That's the other thing too. Is it's completely deserved.
Completely deserved.
And I don't mean to be the eternal pessimist for this team, but I was. You can go back and listen. I
was wrong. I thought they'd be too talented.
I was adamant that this was not going to work out the way that people may have thought it was going to work out.
And honestly, it makes me reevaluate my assessment of Aaron Rodgers in the Pantheon, where I said always that it was the team that was holding him back, creating this simple offense. He, and to an extent, if he had been in a complex offense his entire career and wasn't starting off really that era with Mike McCarthy, who also has an extremely simple offense that we'll be talking about later as well, maybe it could have been different for him and he could have had a different way that he viewed offense, but it's done now. And it's quite clear that he got into a comfort zone. And unlike Brady, who reevaluated, and this is me saying something positive about Brady, who reevaluated after he had that slump in the middle of the three Super Bowl clumps for both for the Pats and then later on, he reevaluated his game and he continued to challenge himself. And Rodgers is not interested in that. I feel that way a little bit about how Dak is right now and what Mike McCarthy, and maybe we'll just talk about that right now. Game last night. The Cowboys offense looks like shit. Dak looks like he's sleepwalking through everything. The offense is way too simple. It's like Mike McCarthy has gone down to Dallas and given him eventually the future disease that we're seeing with Aaron Rodgers right now, where not that competitive. The offense, it's about, there's an arrogance that Mike McCarthy coaches his teams with, and Dak Prescott is now turning the ball over a lot. He threw 2 interceptions last night. Then he padded his stats in garbage time. And it's just okay, the Cowboys were up, but the 49ers just decided to actually play. And did you see that clip of Trevon Diggs?
Oh yeah, kind of like getting into the face of a reporter after the game. Like
But it was because on the field, he was just so lazy in coverage, jogging and
Right.
not going full steam ahead. I think it was to tackle George Kittle. Like, they're sleepwalking as a team.
And when you get to the point also where you're going to take out your frustrations on a member of the press pool, that's also kind of a sign that that's in my opinion, not to psychoanalyze these guys, that's a little bit of transference there.
Yeah.
You'd rather take your frustrations out on an unwitting, powerless individual. So you're just because of how your team has been playing like shit. Like, listen, people all do it. It's people throw shit down the food chain just to see what sticks. I get it. It happens sometimes, but it's happening on both ends of the ball, and I honestly think the Cowboys and the Jets this season are somewhat kindred spirits because, to your point, it's a similar thing. I know the problem with the Cowboys is that it's only a reliance on the talent with which they kind of scheme out everything on each side of the ball in terms of the coaching staff. And what I mean by that is, like, this team is I believe still too talented to be playing this poorly and with this lack of inspiration. But I think there's nothing else being utilized to make where the gaps in talent are any better than they are.
But this is where I'll disagree. I think that the Cowboys are exactly the talent of their record. I don't think the Jets are a 2-6 talent team by any stretch.
I guess what I'm saying,
Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, and then who else? They have no one on offense.
But I guess what I'm
no run game. I mean, I understand that, Overshown is pretty good, but Deron Bland hasn't been playing.
Right.
No Micah Parsons.
Yeah, and I guess
the
injuries on the defense is another thing. But I guess what I'm saying is, in my view, like in a vacuum, with a team that's even just like on offense, a few pretty good offensive linemen, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb. Then on defense, Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs. And then maybe if you even want to count Bland just because his being an interception merchant, fine. There are teams that have less talent than that I think play much better than the Cowboys do.
The Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals being an example on offense, but also, frankly, I never in my life thought I would be saying this, but over in Washington where Dan Quinn left, I find the defense, who is way less talented in my opinion,
True,
working with a lot more intensity, a lot more tenacity, playing hard regardless of the talent disparity, and the offense, I definitely think for the most part, I mean, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, I think the talent disparity is less so, but definitely the defense.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, like, there are teams that even have less high-end star power that play better, and I think that's much more, as you're saying, that's less tangible stuff. That's buy-in, that's like belief in the team, that's some sort of ingenuity in coaching that they just do not have anymore. Like, how uninspired after Dan Quinn leaves to hire fucking Mike Zimmer as your defensive coordinator.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's completely an outdated defensive mind, I think, and it'll be interesting to see. The Cowboys are playing the Falcons next week, and I think there's no love lost between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins. So
right.
I have my hope
Revenge
is that
game.
Kirk Cousins completely destroys that Cowboys defense.
Because I think it's one of those things with Zimmer as an example is both in terms of the scheme and the disposition that it's out of date.
Yeah.
I don't think players liked playing, nor do I think they like playing now, past and present tense, for Mike Zimmer because he's a hard ass and kind of a dick.
Yeah.
And then also, he's one of those guys that's sort of like, what you're getting with your Mike Zimmer defense. He's going to put kind of the same formation out there essentially every time, and it's going to be, will our players win these reps?
Right.
So far, they have not been doing that.
And, even though the 49ers are still, I think defensively, they've lost some pieces. They're not as strong. Fred Warner is still playing out of his mind, but
right.
They lost their D tackle, whose name I'm blanking on, to start the year. Is it Kinlaw?
Well, Kinlaw went to the Jets,
right? But they had another.
Hargrave. Javon Hargrave. Sorry,
Javon Hargrave.
Blanked for a second.
Yes, yeah. They lost him to start the year.
Yep.
It's amazing that the Cowboys couldn't run on them with.
That's sort of the thing too. It's like if you also think about the injuries and the reserves playing for the Niners, you would think, oh, okay, maybe this is a matchup that this Cowboys team could capitalize on. If you can't capitalize on a weakened opponent and also then lose this game still, I'm not. Until further notice, I'm not respecting you as a football team.
Yeah, no,
Like-
it's crazy. And the 49ers, look, with all of their injuries, Brandon Ayuk being out for the year, Debo
Right.
having fluid in his lungs, he still ended up playing, and Christian McCaffrey still not being back out there. Brock Purdy has stepped up, and he is rushing more than I remember him, or at least in a more efficient, timely manner. So, got to give credit to Brock Purdy and his scrambling. It's made the difference for them.
And another thing I will say, just to make a fine point even finer, is when the combination. So listen, in the sense that for a long time, I would say the Cowboys. Tyron Smith is on the Jets now, but I would say a few, even if a few are maybe a little bit on a different tier. Blue chip offensive linemen in some capacities in Dallas. Zach Martin, probably Hall of Fame guard, probably at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Terrence Steele, a pretty good run blocker. He had a bit of an up and down year last year, but for the most part, pretty good run blocker. Outside of Trent Williams, who was into his age 36 season, and was also a little bit banged up to start the year. The 49ers always sort of rely on a stable of somewhat either undersized or kind of like overly athletic guards and tackles. And then mid-round picks like Dominic Pooney, who's a rookie starting at center. Now explain to me why the platoon of Rico Dowdle and Zeke Elliott behind an offensive line that, like I said, with the Cowboys now, definitely not great, lost a bunch of personnel, but still not like the worst unit in the league, can barely run the ball against a depleted 49ers front four or even a blitzing unit. And Isaac Guerrero, the like 4th or 5th round rookie for the Niners at running back, who was running when Jordan Mason was not playing, is in lanes the size of a highway, running at will against this Cowboys defense. This is a guy who you would maybe not even potentially look at on your scouting report just by virtue of him being a rookie and being a mid-round rookie. He looked like fucking Barry Sanders out there a few times last night.
It's the holes that Shanahan creates through scheme and through coaching his offensive line so amazingly.
And just to sort of, not to just belabor it too much, but I think that's just where I think the gap of like, you don't have to be as talented if you give a damn and you're coached better. And it's just so clear where like the give a damn / coaching deficit exists between these two sort of beleaguered teams in injury. But which team is still playing?
But what did
Capital
it say?
P playing.
What did it say to the Cowboys players when they see Jerry going out there saying I'm all in, and they signed 2 guys on veteran basically minimum deals in the offseason?
Oh, in terms of like,
They didn't
yeah.
sign Derrick Henry. They re-signed Ezekiel Elliott, who's not been good.
And also we didn't even mention this. Talk about the bastardization of big boy offensive plays, a la the Bears at the goal line. First possession, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 3rd and 5. They run an option play to the fullback. I'm like, okay, guys, we're not playing serious football right now.
Yeah,
this is not serious. Like this is a travesty. Like, what do you mean you're running the fullback on 3rd and 5 in the first series of the game? It's like
they're trying to be creative like Shanahan, but they have no idea how to.
Yeah, right. It's like trying to build a cabin out of Lincoln logs.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, that really pissed me off.
It was ridiculous, and the offense looks like shit.
Oh, one more. Then Debo going 1-on-1. Oh, let's our big offseason acquisition, Eric Kendricks. Let's have Debo go 1-on-1 against Eric Kendricks. That'll work.
That
out
makes
great.
total sense.
Put him in a spin cycle the second they get parallel to one another.
I mean, I'm sorry. How old is Eric Kendricks here as a linebacker in this league?
He's been around for a while.
He's 32.
Yeah, that's
Eric Kendricks on prime Debo Samuel, who's a matchup problem for
like the best linebackers in the league, like for Fred Warner.
Yeah,
like in practice probably.
Especially when there's no Ayuk.
Right.
Anyway, Ricky Pearsall, by the way, did get some have a big play. They're starting to get him a little bit more involved. We'll see how those other playmakers step up for the 49ers in Ayuk's absence. Texans defeated the Colts. This was a game that it felt like neither of these teams wanted to win. Stephon Diggs out for the year, it seems like. That was a no-contact injury. We'll get some more reporting back.
I know that's really tough.
The Texans are a little disappointing to me. Like, I know that they're 3-0 in the division, and they'll probably win this pathetic division. I mean, the Titans are probably the worst team in football at this point. The Colts are so inconsistent.
Anthony Richardson, I believe, said, "I am tired, so I need to take
I don't care about that. I mean, he
probably shouldn't just. I agree with you, but I feel like just for media fodder / your teammates and things like that.
No.
Maybe just don't say it.
I don't know. I don't mind that. I mean, they do that sometimes with like a quarterback comes out for a snap and they'll do a sneak, right? I mean, he came out for one snap
Because he was tired.
He just scrambled right before that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like just for optics' sake, just maybe avoid that, just to not have people.
I don't know.
Especially a guy who's been, up and down with injuries and things. I guess I'm saying it's just more. I don't actually care.
I think the media is making too much of that. That's all. That's my view of it. But I'm also just. I have
as they want to do.
I have a.
And I'm a member of the media
for Richardson for some reason, because I think like
Can I do a little Colin Cowherd here?
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson is lazy.
But like I when you were talking about Drake May, it reminded me of Anthony Richardson in terms of like another really strong athlete who's raw, and he still is just not putting it together in terms of the offense. It's either big ass play, big bomb to Josh Downs.
Yeah.
Or it's like him throwing a pick deep in his own territory with 30 seconds on the clock before half, setting up the Texans. And so, I think he just still hasn't found a groove, but they are hanging around, and the AFC isn't as strong as I think people anticipated. Like the NFC has more teams in it that are dominant. We'll get to the Lions in a little bit. But without Diggs and without Nico Collins, only for one more game, it appears like the Texans' offense has been struggling without Nico Collins. But without Diggs, the Texans need to rely even more on their run game. And
that's been a mixed bag.
It's been a mixed bag. Yeah. And so, look, I still believe in CJ Stroud. Hopefully they can find it and put it together. But I don't know what else to glean from this except for the fact that, damn, the poor Texans are really banged up. And they need Nico Collins back ASAP.
So 2 things I'll say about the Colts and the Texans as well is that the frustrating thing with the Colts is that I think given a little bit more, if there was more comprehensiveness around the offense, I actually do think I for the most part genuinely really like a lot of, if not almost all of the pieces on the Colts offense as it stands now.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor had a really good
game.
Game.
Like as in if with more consistent play from Anthony Richardson combined with like the sort of synergy of having Josh Downs, who I thought had a very nice game otherwise, as you were saying, A.D. Mitchell, Alec Pierce, the offensive line mostly I think still being a pretty good unit, and then Taylor in the rushing attack. I really like that for the most part, but to your point, I think just the problem is just getting snap in, snap out, consistent output from Richardson. And then in a different way with the Texans, it's like something just seems off in the execution of their plan.
They've been struggling. Kenyon Green, who's a first round pick for them,
who was playing really well.
He was benched during the game.
Oh, he was benched today. Oh gosh, I didn't even see that.
So he's been struggling. So like they've had some issues, and the good news for the Texans is that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter both were kind of all over the place in this game. They were putting pressure on the offense.
Yeah, it's nice to have those 2 guys.
Yeah, I just still think it's wait and see for me in the Texans. They were my Super Bowl pick, right? So I do have a lot of belief in their coaching and in their talent, but they're racking up injuries on offense, and they still haven't had a win where they've done what the Lions did to the Titans. Right. I guess like we'll just move to that really quickly. It was a complete beatdown. I saw some stat. Goff had 28 yards passing at one point, and the Lions had scored 42 points. Is that even humanly possible? They nearly doubled his passing yardage total and had 42 points because it was all, big runs, big special teams plays, and the Titans set them up in a lot of circumstances. So yeah, I really don't have too much to say except for the Lions look like the best team in the NFL.
Well, because I think talk about sort of a dual, a multifaceted offense. I mean, it's what's amazing, and I don't say this to even discredit Jared Goff. I say this just to say that the Lions to me have found such an incredible formula of knowing that with one of, if not the best offensive line in the league for both pass protection and run protection, the trade-off can either be, basically a guaranteed touchdown getting into short yardage with David Montgomery as the back, or setting up really, really explosive runs for Jahmyr Gibbs from more closer to the middle of the field. But then on passing situations, sort of knowing that if some of these receivers, it doesn't really matter who, beat their guy, if Jared Goff is upright and has time, he's making every throw.
Right.
It's the one limitation that was, I think, glaring for Goff earlier in his career, and still is probably an issue for him, is playing under pressure, having to kind of be spontaneous and operate out of structure. But the incredible thing about how this team is built is that he never has to do that.
Yeah.
Because this team, beyond how well coached they are, just the excellent talent across the board in this offensive line makes it so that it's not even a factor for them. And so you have it where, Amon-Ra St. Brown breaks open, touchdown. Brock Wright, second string tight end, breaks open, touchdown. Sam Laporta breaks open, touchdown. And then if they want to have a little fun, which they can because they were basically pantsing the Titans at this point, let's just snap it directly to David Montgomery. He throws a great ball, touchdown.
Right. That's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, that's the play that the Bears, you do when you're up 20,
right.
30.
You're about to score 50 points. Yeah, maybe that's fine. Let the running back throw a touchdown.
And honestly, I think that kind of, when they're able to have fun like that, it's almost like vintage Chiefs. And I mean,
yes.
vintage like the first two
Totally.
Super Bowl wins where or really the first few years with Tyreek Hill where they're just like having the greatest time ever being as creative as possible on offense because they can be.
And sort of knowing your skill level in that way of being like, we can pull off basically anything.
Right.
Like having the confidence and the feeling that like we're kind of invincible on offense. And which of course you don't want to get too far afield in the sense of like getting complacent. But I think the attitude coming from Dan Campbell is we're not going to let up off the gas. We don't do that. Like
no, all gas, no brakes.
AGNB, baby.
That's him.
The real all gas, no brakes guy.
Yeah. So I mean, the Titans, Mason Rudolph actually made some shocking plays with his legs and things like that, but they petered out after a little bit of spurt of energy really quickly, and then it was just a beat down by the Lions. So.
This team is also lost, I believe.
Oh,
yes. I think is going to be
even though Calvin Ridley finally showed up, but
I think after his post-game comments a few weeks ago, they were like, okay, he's actually really pissed off, and we need to do something about this.
Feed him. So the other NFC North victory were the Packers beating the Jags. Josh Jacobs. The two best run teams in football are and outside of their quarterback, just like from a running back running. Well, the three best teams in football. Just say. It's the Ravens, it's the Packers, and it's the Lions. Like, they can run the freaking football. I would honestly, I'm taking the Ravens out because sometimes, I mean, they couldn't really get going, actually, against the Browns. But those two teams are just amazing at running the football. Josh Jacobs is a stud. And Malik Willis, turns out this could be like the acquisition that keeps the Packers in the hunt to win their division. He looks like he can really be a phenomenal backup for them because he can complement that run game. And Jordan Love has been inconsistent this year. To me, it looked like he wasn't right early on. And I was like, oh, is he dehydrated because it's so hot down in Jacksonville? But it wasn't quite clear. The Jags are a mess. Christian Kirk broke his collarbone. Brian Thomas Jr. is getting an MRI. Like, I can't believe that.
This is a sim to end season. Like, please, let's just call it.
I mean, had Doug Peterson been fired?
And if
why
not,
not?
I was going to say, and if not, the only question remains, why?
Bizarre to me. But the Packers, Tucker Kraft had a touchdown. They distribute the ball incredibly well. So Packers beat the Jags, but did not cover the spread. So I went 2-1 instead of 3-0. It was a half-point
annoying
situation. Yes. The other games, we'll quickly run through them. The Falcons beat the Bucks. The Bucks are, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin.
Yeah, and honestly, for those limitations, I still thought this was sort of an example of a game you're talking about, of Baker did turn the ball over, but at the very least, they were trying to score. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
Otten had 2 touchdowns.
Right. It wasn't like, oh, Godwin and Evans are out, let's be conservative. It was sort of like, okay, let's figure out who we can feed instead, which was honestly impressive, because as a result of sort of where he is in the depth chart, I kind of didn't realize how dynamic of a playmaker he could be.
He's been like solid for the year, but in terms of being targeted in the end zone, Baker had been targeting those other 2 guys before. Right. Now the Bucks have been swept by the Falcons. And the
which
Atlanta
is huge
Falcons. Who else is going to come? We thought that after week 2, we were like, oh wow, the NFC South really strong. I mean, damn, these Saints keep putting up all these points.
I know, how funny is that, right? We were like, wow, Jesus, Saints most explosive offense in the league.
But now it's like it looks like it's the Falcons' division to lose, and we'll see how it goes. The Bucks could maybe, I guess, creep ahead of them, but for now, the Falcons look like the best team in that division for sure.
And I'm really, it was quite satisfying to see, Kyle Pitts get going.
True.
He had, two really nice touchdown runs for Kyle Pitts.
I mean, God, did I need to hear, never need to hear again that it was National Tight End Day. But
it's National Tight End Day. Oh my God.
Broadcast for reminding us of that.
Wow, tight ends broke the catch record on National Tight Ends Day.
Yeah, it's made up. So yeah, Kyle Pitts had a good day, independent of that stupid made up holiday by the NFL. And then in terms of the Saints, just to touch on that quickly in the NFC South, the Saints offense is just shit now. I mean, it looked better when they benched Spencer Rattler, but it's hard to say, was that because the Chargers defense wasn't prepared for him and they were prepared
for Jake Haener?
Wasn't prepared for Haener, who looks like he's 14 years old. They were prepared for Spencer Rattler, but I don't know. It didn't really matter. Like, they ended up not scoring a touchdown in that game. The Saints defense was better. They held its own until Herbert started kind of just taking over and throwing bombs to Ladd McConkey, who is really emerging. He had 6 catches for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a really impressive grab in the back corner of the end zone. It seems like his reputation as a possession contested ball guy is really preceding him. And Herbert's passing yardage ticking up in this regard is impressive because Quentin Johnston's been out for quite a while. And so he's finding Josh Palmer. Will Dissly is a great underneath option for him when he's feeling like he may be facing pressure, and Ladd McConkey is emerging. So there was that play to, I believe his name is Simi Fehoko on the Chargers. He had an unbelievable throw from Herbert to the back left side of the end zone that I genuinely thought was a touchdown, because it seemed as if he got one foot down and dragged the toe, but I guess his heel was out of bounds. Mm-hmm. But I was like, that's a classic instance where, Justin Herbert makes one of the best throws I've ever seen in my life, and for some inexplicable reason, either a receiver doesn't catch it, or a flag calls it back, or they step out of bounds. Yeah.
But we saw a few really amazing Herbert rockets yesterday, which I always love to see. And McConkey, to your point, 100%. I think people were a little bit concerned about the frame, but I think because of of the exceptional athlete that he is, his route running and his ability to sort of juke out guys in man coverage was what makes him such a reliable target, despite being a little bit, short and slight. But it's what makes him a really, really reliable target and so something that Herbert has been lacking seriously for almost his entire playing career.
Yeah. The Eagles beat the Bengals. By the way, in terms of games where I actually was pretty confident. I thought the Bengals would win this at home. Newsflash: their defense is still shit, complete shit.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad.
The Chiefs just traded for that
Josh Uche.
Yeah, and off the Pats, and it's like, God, the Bengals.
Maybe the Bengals could have done that.
But of course, they never make moves. They don't care. T. Higgins was out this game. He struggled a little bit with health, and it's in the contract year. The game really shifted after Jalen Hurts threw this long touchdown to Devontae Smith. And the game got going for the Eagles as it has in the second half. They still extended that streak where they aren't scoring in the first quarter at all. But the defense clamped down in the second half, and the offense got a little bit explosive. The Bengals, they couldn't force an incompletion for Jalen Hurts, who has been inaccurate all year. Like the secondary for the Bengals is doggy doo-doo, horrible.
And I think like as a result, this was, I think, definitely one of, if not the best, through the air game for Jalen Hurts. And I think it probably obviously helps to have Smith and Brown sort of back in full effect. And then, even backup offensive linemen on the Eagles were basically stifling Trey Hendrickson. So, I mean, when that's happening, it's like, all right, these guys are dead in the water on defense. And then, but I will say, good sign for the Eagles as well, though. With how this defense played against the Burrow-led offense, and that Cooper DeJean had a few really nice plays. The second rookie that they drafted to augment their secondary. Nakobe Dean and Zach Bonner sort of elevating a what has been a traditionally pretty bad linebacking core. So that's probably encouraging if you're watching the Vic Fangio Eagles, on defense. And I guess we'll see if this continues. Obviously, we'll have to see if it continues offensively against not like kind of one of the most like lifeless, kind of embarrassingly bad units in the league.
And Burrow looks amazing. It's not the offense. It is not the offense. It is, and they have Chase Brown is good.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
They
definitely
miss Joe Mixon. They really do miss Joe Mixon there in Cincinnati. And the Bills beat the Seahawks. Rainy ass first half. Josh Allen's automatic. Don't have a ton to say about that except for the fact that
they looked
pretty hapless on offense, the Seahawks.
All right, until further notice, I'm not, guys. I just have to say it. The Bills are good, and I'm not betting against the Bills anymore.
I know. I mean, I think that they are emerging. Like the fact that he found Keon Coleman in the end zone was a big deal.
And I think Coleman's giving life in a way that they haven't really had in a receiver, and in the ways I wasn't expecting. In the sense that I thought he was mainly just going to be a guy trying to get separation, just catch point, kind of like run up and try and get the ball in the end zone. He does a lot more than that, and even in stuff that I think just sort of sets the tone. On a possession that he didn't even get the ball, he just ran up and stuck the defender, just it rammed him into the ground, and then basically started pointing and laughing at him. And I was like, he's just adding something.
Yeah.
In tangible and intangible to this group that they haven't had in a while.
Amari Cooper did that same thing where like he'll go off one game and disappear the next.
Right.
He had one reception for 3 yards. Like, I don't know what to make of him, but I do think that regardless, he adds a dimension to the offense that frees up a guy like Keon Coleman.
Yes, definitely.
To have more success. So always watching the Bills, even when I think that maybe they're not the most talented on defense. Josh Allen, he's my MVP for this year.
But I will say the as well, just to give some credit, the run game, the platoon, I'm enjoying the platoon of James Cook and Ray Davis so far. That, Cook is kind of the explosive, speedy number one option, and Ray Davis is kind of the change of pace bruiser back. I think it's been working for them. And the defense, definitely, we've been talking all year, the personnel has definitely taken a big hit. Real crucial injuries. But, they still are playing with a lot. They're still playing with a lot of energy, with a lot of they're still playing aggressive, which I think you want to see in a Sean McDermott defense, that kind of attitude never goes below a certain level. And I think that even with the talent, it's more than you can say of teams where I'm like, I keep going back to the Cowboys because I'm like, some of these teams where I'm genuinely like, their talent level is lesser, or I just also would expect a little bit more. This team is still, despite their deficiencies, playing hard.
Yeah, they are. They are, and they're well coached. And
right.
That makes a difference.
Totally.
The Chiefs beat the Raiders. Travis Kelce finally had a game on National Tight End Day. And
it was National Tight End Day?
Yeah, thank you for letting me know. And, I mean, I don't know, like, Mahomes finally had a game where it's like, okay, he did still throw an interception, but he threw for 2 touchdowns.
Right.
DeAndre Hopkins got maybe 2 catches early on. It wasn't a big explosive game for him, but he got involved. I mean, the guy's 32 years old. They're just trying to elevate the Juju Smith-Schuster possession over the middle role.
Right, exactly.
And
the MVS Juju kind of ceremonial role.
And I mean, look, the thing is DeAndre Hopkins always looks cool in a uniform. Seeing him in that Chiefs uniform, like number 8.
Yeah, there you go.
That's weird.
Yeah, exactly.
And he has that long, like braid.
Yeah, he's the big braid, which
he's
I like.
So slim, and you're like, wow, this guy. This is exciting. But he is 32. He's a little limited in that regard. Still, though, the Chiefs needed all the help they can get at receiver, and he was able to throw a touchdown to Xavier Worthy, get him a little bit more involved. So
it is just nauseating to me. Not because I am even a hater, but just to comprehend like what this team is. That I probably feel a little bit less confident about them than I did even the team last year, which I felt was the least confident I've been in a Chiefs team, especially with that lopsided loss to the Raiders on Christmas Day. And I say that with this team being literally 7-0.
yeah,
Like it's
their defense. They are the best defense probably right now in the NFL. Karlaftis is all over the
Monster.
place. Chris Jones still a monster. Their
like game breaker
secondary.
still, Chris Jones. Like just
Yeah.
like even in like he's a guy where it's still even in his more advanced age is like he's still just gonna turn a few possessions over on their head just by himself.
Yeah, and like they have some injuries. Like Leo Chanel is dealing with a shoulder injury, but he's been able to still be effective. They just all over the field have studs, and it's helped by the fact that they have one of the best defensive minds in the league,
Right.
Spagnuolo, who makes them a formidable unit. But that was the best complete win really that the Chiefs have had all year.
Right, against a kind of hapless Raiders team. Yeah.
And lastly, the Broncos beat the Panthers, the most hapless team probably in the NFL.
Yes, seriously.
By unleashing Bo Nix. He had 4 total touchdowns. He rushed all over the place. Cortland Sutton had a really good game. He had 100 receiving yards.
Yeah,
finally.
Nick said what I appreciated seeing is he had a few nice throws down the field where I feel like early on in the season it was like, why are we confining this guy to literally only throwing like behind the line of scrimmage? But now I feel like maybe it's a comfort thing, maybe not, because now I honestly think seeing some of these throws, I'm like I think he's sort of acclimating more where he's like, oh, okay, I will take what's there for me down the field.
And I think Sean Payton trusts him more, right?
Yes, right.
So don't look now, but the Broncos are 5-3.
That's the thing, though, right? Is like we have to keep an eye on it because I think in a little bit more of a diffuse AFC of like secondary teams, they could certainly end up in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And Sean Payton is now 3-0 against the NFC South. That's who the Broncos have played so far this year. So he's beaten the Panthers. They beat the Saints, his old team. And I guess they haven't played the Falcons, but they beat the Bucks. Remember, they beat them up in Tampa Bay. So he still has probably a bit of a beat on his old NFC South rivals, but
not for nothing. This is relative to the Chiefs another really great defense that I wasn't that less so with the Chiefs in the sense of I was anticipating the Chiefs being a great defense. The Broncos sort of came out of nowhere to be like a really like wall to wall very solid unit.
Yeah, and it's probably in part because like a lot of teams play from their pass rush back to their secondary.
Right.
They play secondary first.
Totally.
And it's freed up their pass rush. Like Surtain is probably the best corner in the NFL. But Nick Bonito, who was a linebacker out of Oklahoma, I remember hoping that the Giants would draft him. He ended up being taken in the second round by the Broncos. He has had 6 straight games with a sack, and that Vance Joseph-led defense has been one of the best units all year.
And I think they just utilize him well in the sense that it seems like all of these guys, Zach Allen, PJ Locke, and as you said, Benito's just like a dude shot out of a cannon. Like he's not that big, but he's so athletic, so bendy that if you kind of give him an angle and a sort of a somewhat of a free lane, he is gonna get home. He's just that kind of athletic freak that I feel like maybe was not as prominently featured. But credit to Vance Joseph because I think similarly. Obviously not the same caliber, but Joseph to me is akin to someone like Spagnuolo, like Brian Flores, like Todd Bowles of like we are always going to try to find creative and sort of unexpected ways to pressure the quarterback. And we saw that in Arizona with less defined personnel, and he's doing that all over again in Denver.
He absolutely is. So I'm rooting for the Broncos, and I'm rooting for Bo Nix, who was
I'm happy to see him
totally.
I'm happy to see him actually doing quarterback stuff.
Right. And he was made fun of or at least the Broncos were made fun of for taking him so high, and thus far he's looked pretty damn good. And so we shall see. All right, folks, going to read some IMs, and then we're skipping town. Tater Tot says a huge amount of tight ends had great days for fantasy too on National Tight End Day.
It's National Tight End Day.
Thank you, Tater Tot. Not thank you. Not so much. J-Man Jays, love that the Packers are better than the Jets. Sorry, Bradley, but Rodgers is the worst. I don't follow the NFL like I used to, but I enjoy the show. My father would have really enjoyed you guys. He likes to play the pro line, left is best. Winnipeg Jets 8-0, by the way. Hell yeah. Those are the Jets that you like.
Yeah, at least one Jets team is thriving.
Will from Indiana, great day for ESVN to happen because it's my 23rd birthday today.
Oh,
Yay!
happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Will. Thanks, Emma and Bradley, for your great work here in MR as always. And I suppose as an aside, congrats to your all's Knicks on beating my Pacers. The vibes are not the best, but on the other side, Indiana football is 8-0. I'm over the moon for them, and plus college basketball is starting. So I hope to talk about it more. Much love, leftist ESPN. We're getting a new coach over there at the Indiana Fever. They ended up firing their head coach after 2 years. So things are not all bad, and the Colts are okay.
And listen, IU football, where the Hoosiers are back in a big way. They were ranked higher than Alabama football last week in the top 25, which I can't imagine has happened a lot in the last, 25 years.
Yeah, exactly. All right, got to jump, but quickly, predictions for tonight. I hate predicting the Giants, but yeah. I mean, the Giants are going to lose, but it's just a question by how much. Like, the line is...
Because Giants Steelers?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say...
Well, it is an away game, so Daniel Jones may actually throw a touchdown pass.
How about... I'm going to say Steelers...
The line is 6.
I'm going to say Steelers 24, Giants 17.
Yeah, that seems fair. I'll have the Giants covering. I'll have it 23-20.
Okay, cool.
But the Steelers winning. That's my prediction.
No, it's okay. DJ's going to bounce back.
I mean, I just feel like Malik Neighbors is going to be able to make some plays, but that's about it.
We're definitely going to have a big game from Theo Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
To continue National Tight End Day.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's not over until the week is over.
Folks, thanks so much for watching the show. We'll be back on Thursday for our picks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.